Hey, Janice.
Hi, good morning.
Today we're going to talk about when buying a house without a realtor. So every year, between 10 and 20% of home buyers close without a realtor. I think that number says that it's not quite rare, but it's not usual either. So if you're considering going that route, buying a house without a realtor, today we're going to cover some of the risks and possible drawbacks of going that way, and maybe you should consider.
So today we are going to cover sellers not taking you as seriously, choosing the right neighborhood, negotiations, all the mortgage paperwork and process, and then all the other paperwork that goes along with it.
Cool. And lastly, I will bust 3 common myths about buying a home without a realtor.
So we have a little bit of experience in this topic. Anthony has actually written a book available on Amazon on how to buy your perfect first home. I always suggest this. I know it says first home, but I suggest it to everybody because it's a really good refresher. If it's been a few years, this will help you through that process. Also has some new books coming out. You can sign up at anthonyspark.com/join to be in the know for when new books come out.
Perfect. Let's get started. Okay, number one. Number one thing to know when buying a house without a realtor. Number one, sellers may not take you as seriously. So sellers value closability, if that's a word, just as much, if not more, than getting the highest possible offer, right? So just imagine, swap places. If you're a home buyer, just put yourself in the position of a home seller. If you're the seller and you have similar offers, in the ballpark, but one is from a represented buyer, and you kind of know that they know what they're doing and they will close. They'll kind of do what they say. Versus a do-it-yourself buyer who's kind of fumbling his way through.
Right.
Like, yeah, don't worry, I'll figure out how to do that.
Let me Google it.
Yeah, who's more likely to close and actually consummate this transaction versus who's likely to abort, 2 or 3 months down the line, and you're going to have to start over from scratch. Maybe now in the dead of winter when it's not so hot, maybe not as good a time to sell. So closability is really important to sellers, and you don't look as closable when you don't have a realtor.
No, not so much. So how about neighborhood knowledge? What if you're moving into a place you have no idea where you're moving? Yes, you can Google it, but the realtor brings with he or she some really good knowledge of the neighborhood. Most people work in that neighborhood. They've been saturated in that area and they know. But on the flip side of that, if you're moving into an area you already know, you might be okay. For example, I moved 4 streets over. So I kind of had a really good, I knew the area. We still use a realtor, but I knew the area, so it can happen if you are familiar.
And just a New York City note, a good realtor would actually know your particular building, not just your neighborhood, and just know all the doormen and know, which streets are a little crazy and you don't want your kids standing so close to the curve, things like that. Just really, 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 kind of micro niche knowledge, for the city at least.
It's great information to have though when you're moving in.
Yeah, sure. Cool. So next thing, things to know when buying a house without a realtor, the negotiations, right? It always helps to have a buffer or layer in most negotiations. And the reason for that is it reduces emotions and it prevents you from potentially taking things personally, right? So just imagine, from the seller side, for example, oh, well, this kitchen is a little dated, but you love your kitchen. If you hear that,
it's my kitchen.
Now suddenly you don't like that buyer so much anymore, right. Even if it's a legitimate concern and it's a legitimate buyer, right? So you want to remove some of the personalness out of the situation and create some buffer. That's what I'm talking about. And that's just on one example from the sell side. There are many similar examples from the buy side. Also, your realtor will probably know some things to fight for, or what's commonly should be paid for or not, such as, in terms of closing costs, based on local customs or traditions, the buyer might be responsible for XYZ closing costs, but normally the seller should pay A, B, and C. If you don't know that, you might be fighting or negotiating for something that's kind of a given, right? You need to know the local norms and customs. That's where a realtor can help.
So the mortgage process, it's a process. There is a lot of paperwork involved. It's a slow, painful process is how I like to talk about it. I think you have to give paperwork of your firstborn by the time you're done. But you can do it. Absolutely, it can be done. But the benefit to having a realtor, though, is they know the process. They can help nudge things along. They probably know maybe the person who's dealing with the mortgage process and say, hey, let's speed this up, or can I help? What can I do?
And that's just one area of the paperwork. The last tip is there's more and more paperwork than just the mortgage. In the New York City area in particular, if you have a condo or co-op application, it's like sometimes more than a mortgage application. It could be like a college loan application. It's huge. And it might even involve scheduling an interview or, being reviewed by the board of the condo board. So there's a lot of coordinating, not just filling out the paperwork, but coordinating deadlines and navigating, when the board meets to conduct those interviews. Just having a realtor can really help smooth out that process.
Yes, absolutely. So tell us, what are the 3 common myths that need correcting?
All right, cool. First myth. If you're buying a house without a realtor, you're limited to buying FSBOs or for sale by owner properties. It's not true. If you're not represented, you can buy any house on the market. It's kind of a open and shut one. That's just not true.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, second myth. Here's the myth. Since the seller pays for both sides of the realtors, meaning both the buy-side realtor and the sell-side realtor, you're not saving any money by not using a realtor. So that's not necessarily true. Okay, so number one, if the seller is selling on his own, meaning he's not paying for a realtor at all, then you'll either have to pay for your own realtor, which is unusual, or you'll have to somehow negotiate that with the seller, which kind of creates another hurdle to the transaction. If the seller is a traditional seller and has hired their own realtor and has put the house out for, let's say, 6%, the traditional deal is the sell-side realtor gets 3% of that, meaning half of that, and the buy-side realtor gets the other half, another 3%. Right? However, if there is no realtor on the buy-side, the overall commission usually gets reduced to like 4.5% or 5%. Right? So the seller's realtor, so I'm throwing a lot at you, but the seller's realtor kind of does both sides of the transaction, which is not ideal. We'll talk about it in another episode. But because they're sort of doing the same deal, they don't get the full 6%. They get a reduced amount. So yes, there is a discount to the seller. You need to be aware of that because then you can negotiate a lower purchase price accordingly because the net dollar amount to the seller would be the same. Right? Okay. Right. If that's getting over anyone's head, let me know in the comments. I'll maybe write it out into a blog post or another episode. We'll get into those in some details.
Yes.
Okay. So lastly, a myth about buying a house without a realtor is, hey, I could just hire a really good attorney and he'll do it all anyway. So why would I need a realtor? That's just wrong. Right. Attorneys are not built out. So there are attorneys who do have their real estate license. I have my real estate license. But most attorneys, especially real estate closing attorneys, are not set up to be realtors. There's completely different processes and systems and support staff. And there's skills for both roles, right? So that's just, that's like asking, what's a funny example? That's like asking your internist to, do brain surgery. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
something like that.
It does, yes. Your dermatologist do, foot surgery. Exactly,
right.
Yeah.
Just not going to work, yeah.
Maybe not so much, but those are all really great tips. Amazon, How to Buy Your Perfect First Home, really does dive into what happens like as you're starting this whole process of buying a home. See what it entails. See if it's something that you could do on your own. Join and sign up for the mailing list so you can find out when new books come out because Anthony is just writing them pretty quick now. AnthonySPark.com/join. But get on the list and then you'll know. You might even get a free copy. And I think that's all we have for today. So we'll talk next time.
Very good. Thanks everyone for listening. Thank you, Janice. Bye.